I'm not really the kind of guy who stands in front of people and talks about this, whatever this is. Most of my life, I've lived pretty quietly, kept my thoughts tucked away unless they felt important enough to share. And honestly, most thoughts don't make the cut. You get older and you start realizing silence is underrated, peace is underrated, but last night, yeah, last night wasn't something I could keep quiet about. I tried, trust me. I sat with it for hours, turning it over in my head, asking myself if I'd finally cracked from all the long nights, all the miles, all the life. But no, no, this was real as my heartbeat, as real as my breath, as real as you sitting there listening right now. I'm just going to say it. Jesus Christ appeared to me twice, and saying those words out loud feels surreal even now. I keep waiting for some kind of punchline, some kind of rational explanation, something I can grab onto and say, see, it was just a dream, but it wasn't. I know what a dream feels like. This wasn't that. And if this costs me my reputation or whatever's left of my career, then, well, so be it, because what I saw, what he showed me, shook me down to my bones. I cried last night in a way I haven't since I was a child, the kind of crying that empties you and fills you at the same time. It started around midnight. I hadn't been sleeping well. It happens sometimes. You get older and the mind doesn't turn off the way you want it to. I was sitting alone in my living room, no lights on, just me and the dark, thinking about everything, the world, the country, people drifting apart, the noise, the anger, the exhaustion in the air. I don't know if you can feel it too, but it's like everyone's carrying something heavy and pretending they're not. I sat there letting my mind roam through all of it, and then suddenly the room got cold, not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, just different, a shift, and then there was light, soft, warm, but somehow separate from any source. And he was standing there, just standing there, like he'd always been a part of the room and I'd only just noticed. I can't explain how I knew who he was. There was no doubt, no hesitation. It wasn't the long-haired, glowing figure you see in paintings. He looked like a man tired, worn, like someone who'd walked 1,000 miles carrying the weight of the world. His clothes were simple, but his eyes, I've never seen eyes like that in my life. They weren't human, but they weren't alien either. They were everything: age, sadness, compassion, understanding, and something deeper than love. My whole body froze. I've met powerful people, famous people, people you're supposed to be intimidated by. But nothing prepared me for him. My throat went dry. My heart felt like it was trying to break out of my chest. I couldn't speak. I didn't want to move in case the moment shattered. He spoke first. His voice wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, quiet, but somehow it filled the entire room like every molecule of air carried it. He said my name, my actual name, and hearing that, it almost broke me before anything even began. He said, I need you to see something. I need you to bear witness. I don't know what else I could have done except nod. There are moments in life when choice disappears, when all you can do is surrender to the moment in front of you. I reached for his hand, and the second our hands touched, the room dissolved. Or maybe it expanded. I don't know. Words don't do it justice. I was still in my home, and yet I wasn't. It was like seeing the world through two versions of myself at once. One grounded in the room, one looking at something much larger, much heavier. He showed me America, the real America, not the one we show off in movies, not the one politicians talk about like it's a trophy they're fighting over. No, he showed me the raw, unfiltered truth. I saw the division running like cracks in glass, getting deeper and wider every day. I saw neighbors treating each other like strangers, or worse, enemies. I saw families split apart not by tragedies or disasters, but by opinions. I saw people scrolling through their phones surrounded by thousands of others, but drowning in loneliness. I saw children growing up with fear instead of wonder, with anxiety instead of hope, kids looking for meaning in screens because the world stopped giving them any. I saw greed dressed up as progress, cruelty disguised as strength. I saw conversations replaced with arguments, arguments replaced with screaming, and nuance replaced with hostility. And then he showed me the churches, and that hurt the most. Buildings full of people singing songs about love, and then stepping outside and living like the teachings were optional. Leaders chasing power instead of compassion. Faith warped into something political, not spiritual. He showed me all of it, and each image felt like a punch, not because I didn't know it was true, but because I did know and I'd been pretending it wasn't that bad. Pretending everything would magically get better somehow, but he wasn't done. That was just the war, just the foundation, the truth of where we stand. Then he said something that chilled me deeper than the cold in the room earlier. He said, "Now I'll show you where you're going." And that's when things got darker. I watched America unfold before me in ways that made my chest ache. Cities without conversation, streets where people didn't even nod at one another, houses separated by walls, not fences, connected only by Wi-Fi signals. Everyone wrapped up in their own curated lives, avoiding anyone who might challenge their little comfortable reality. Violence wasn't the kind you saw on the news. It was quieter, insidious, creeping into everyday life. A sharp word here, a dismissive glance there, small cruelties that accumulated into a landscape where kindness became an anomaly. Families that once held together through love and shared struggle had become arrangements of convenience. People living under the same roof, but existing like strangers, only cohabiting because the alternative seemed impossible. And the children. I can't stop thinking about the children. Screens replacing parents' voices. The hum of technology replacing lullabies. Kids growing up never really touched by empathy, watching the world filtered through pixels and likes. Their eyes had a hollowness I recognized because I've felt it in myself when life empties you out. They were anxious, depressed, medicated, drifting through existence as if gravity itself had abandoned them. I felt a pain that went beyond sympathy. It was terror, because I knew that if we kept walking this path, these were the faces of the future, and the faces of our future deserved better. The land itself, God, the land, was sick. The forests, rivers, plains, all dulled and diminished. The mountains I've filmed all my life, the deserts, the oceans, all diminished because care had been replaced with convenience. People had traded stewardship for neglect, appreciation for exploitation. Places I once thought of as eternal were crumbling under the weight of indifference. And then I saw the communities, not just the land, towns where hope had been shelved like an outdated book. People walking through days that were gray and unremarkable because optimism had become dangerous, maybe even naive. There was a pervasive sense that life was something to endure, not embrace. Democracy, the thing we've always been so proud of, looked hollow, ritualistic. People going through motions but devoid of belief, of conviction, of responsibility. Power was a commodity, a prize to be hoarded, not a trust to be exercised wisely. And in that, I saw the absence of faith, not just faith in God, but faith in each other, faith in institutions, faith that tomorrow could be better. A nation that had forgotten its own promise, its own purpose. The weight of it was unbearable, and my knees felt weak as I tried to grasp what I was seeing. I turned to him, my voice cracking under the weight of everything, and I asked, "Why me? Why show this to me?" My words sounded small, inadequate, almost absurd. He looked at me, those impossibly deep eyes, and simply said, "Because it doesn't have to be this way. There's still time. I need witnesses." Witnesses. That word alone felt sacred. He wasn't asking me to fix everything. He was asking me to see it, to feel it, and to speak it into the world, to bear the weight so that others might understand, might awaken. And then he was gone, just like that, leaving me in my living room with tears I couldn't stop, with a heart I didn't know how to carry. Minutes had passed, maybe an hour, maybe nothing at all. Time had no meaning. I poured a cup of coffee, more for comfort than alertness, and tried to process what I'd seen. Tried to convince myself that maybe it was a dream, a hallucination, a late night episode of exhaustion. But deep down, I knew better. I'd seen truth raw and unflinching, and there was no returning to ignorance. Then he returned, no grand light, no celestial fanfare. Just him, standing quietly beside me at the window, the ordinary presence of the extraordinary. "You're troubled," he said. It wasn't a question. Of course I was troubled. He had shown me the end of everything I loved about this country, everything I'd held close in my life. "I showed you one possible future," he corrected softly, gently. "Not inevitable, not final, only possible." And that's when he spoke about the choice, about the fork in the road, the paths that were invisible to most but clear to those willing to see. "Comfort is the enemy of change," he said, and I felt every word like a strike to the soul. People don't act when they're comfortable, don't act when convenience rules, when distraction wins. To make a difference, you have to see what's at stake. You have to let the truth sink into your bones. Only then will the courage to act rise. He told me of love in its purest, simplest form. Love one another, care for each other. Don't get lost in your own concerns. Don't let fear or hatred rule your hearts. Choose compassion, mercy, grace. He said it slowly, deliberately, as if he were carving the words into my soul, and I wanted to argue. I wanted to say, "We're not capable of that anymore." And he nodded, agreed even, "You're not yet, but you could be." And then I realized the weight of my own role. I'm just a man who's told stories, tried to make movies that mean something, tried to live a decent life. What power did I have to influence the hearts of millions? But he smiled at me then, and it wasn't a smile of mockery. It was the smile of someone who has seen the potential in you even when you can't see it in yourself. "You do what you've always done," he said. "Tell stories, speak the truth, bear witness. Trust that people will hear and respond. Change rarely comes from above. It comes from ordinary people who refuse to accept the world as it is." I asked what I should tell them, the people who will listen, or who may not. And he said, "Tell them what you saw, tell them what's at stake, and tell them it's not too late. Never too late to choose love over hate, unity over division, hope over despair. Remind them that the soul of a nation, any nation, is in their hands, in their daily choices, in how they treat the person next to them. Some of you might think this is impossible, that people don't change, that the world is already beyond saving. He didn't lie to me. He said some won't listen, some will. But some of those who do will act, and their actions will inspire others. That's how it spreads. That's always how it's spread. You don't need everyone. You just need enough people who remember what matters, enough people who believe in the possibility of better." And then he put his hand on my shoulder, and warmth flooded through me. Strength I hadn't felt in years, courage I thought I'd lost. "Be brave," he said. "Speak even when mocked. Risk your reputation, your comfort, your pride. Choose truth over ease." And I realized, for the first time in a long time, that even one voice matters. One witness matters. One ordinary person can shift the story, can ripple change through the world in ways invisible but profound. After that moment, after he left me standing by the window, I felt the weight of what I'd seen pressing down like a hand I couldn't shake off. It wasn't just fear or despair. It was responsibility. Not the kind you get with a title or a job, but the kind that comes from knowing the truth and being called to act on it. I poured another cup of coffee, the warmth barely touching the chill in the room. I walked to the living room again, staring out at the street below, at the faint flicker of lights in houses where people were probably asleep, dreaming their ordinary lives, oblivious to the paths they were choosing day by day. And I thought, if I don't speak, if I don't tell someone, if I don't bear witness, then who I've spent my life trying to tell stories, to capture glimpses of humanity on film, to make people feel something, even if just for a few minutes. But last night, the story wasn't on a screen. It was real, immediate, urgent, and it wasn't about entertainment. It was about truth, the truth of what's happening to us, what we're doing to ourselves, to each other, to the country we love, or at least the idea of it. And it broke me in ways I haven't been broken in decades. Tears I couldn't control streamed down my face, hot and unstoppable, the kind that leaves you hollow and yet painfully alive. I thought about the people around me. About friends, strangers, the people I pass on the street, the people whose stories I'll never know. Each of us is a choice, a node in a chain that stretches far beyond what we can see. Every act of kindness, every conversation, every effort to understand, to listen, to forgive, ripples outward. And yet, how often do we choose differently? How often do we choose fear, anger, division, self, interest over the difficult, messy work of connection? He showed me the consequences of those choices, multiplied across years, across generations, until the very fabric of our communities was worn thin. And then I thought about hope. He didn't leave me with despair. He didn't say that everything was lost. He said there's still time. He said that ordinary people, people like me, people like you, still have the power to choose differently, and that, for all the heartbreak, for all the tears, for all the fear, was the light in the darkness. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. It was a spark, and sparks, if tended, if protected, can grow into fire. Fire that warms, that illuminates, that guides. I sat there thinking about my own life, the choices I've made, the stories I've told, the impacts, small though it may seem I've had on the world. And I realized that fear of ridicule, fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood is often the barrier that keeps us silent. I've lived long enough to see people's reactions, to hear the whispers behind their smiles. And yes, sometimes I've held back because of it. But last night made me understand something vital. Silence in the face of truth is not protection. It's complicity. Every day we choose not to act, we participate in the continuation of harm, of apathy, of neglect. I thought about the children again, their hollow eyes, their anxious hearts. And I felt anger, not the hot, destructive anger that burns bridges, but a deep, focused anger that channels grief into action. If we allow this future to unfold without intervention, we've failed them. We've failed the ones who have no voice, the ones who inherit the consequences of our choices. That anger, strangely, was mixed with a profound tenderness. A tenderness for the possibility that we could be better, that we could choose differently, that the story is not yet written, and we are all authors in some small way. Then I thought about ordinary people, people who feel powerless, invisible, unheard. People who believe that one person can't make a difference. I realized with sudden clarity that one person's actions, one person's courage, can indeed ripple through the world in ways impossible to measure. It's not about fame or position or money. It's about willingness, willingness to speak, to act, to bear witness. That's how change has always happened, not from the top down, not from kings, presidents, or CEOs, but from people who decided enough was enough, people who refused to accept injustice, division, or despair as the final answer. And I realized that the message he left me with was deceptively simple, almost too simple: love. Love in action, not just words. Care, compassion, grace, mercy. Choices that have the power to transform ordinary days into extraordinary ones. It's not about ideology, not about religion, not about politics. It's about humanity. It's about looking at the person next to you, whether you agree with them or not, and recognizing that they are worthy of respect, worthy of dignity, worthy of the same love you hope to receive yourself. And that, over time, those small acts of choice, small, persistent, sometimes invisible, accumulate. They alter the trajectory of communities, of societies, of nations. I reflected on my own reluctance to speak. My fear that I'd be ridiculed, dismissed, called crazy, and then I realized that the risk pales in comparison to the cost of silence. If even a fraction of what I saw comes to pass because we failed to act, the consequence is far greater than any personal embarrassment or discomfort. That's what he wanted me to understand. The stakes are higher than ego, higher than comfort, higher than fear, and yet the remedy is available. It's accessible to anyone willing to step forward and speak, to act, to bear witness. I remember standing there at the window long after he left, the city dark beneath me, my heart still raw, my mind racing. I thought about what it means to live fully, to be fully present, to take responsibility not just for oneself, but for the collective, for the country, for the world. It's daunting, almost unbearably so, but it's also empowering, because the same ordinary choices that lead to decay, indifference, and despair can also produce renewal, connection, and hope. The path is narrow, sometimes lonely, often uncomfortable, but it's there. It's always there, waiting for those willing to take it. I sat with that thought until the first gray light of morning crept into my room, and I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Not because everything is fixed, not because the world is suddenly safe, but because I know the truth. Because I know the possibility, and because I know, now more than ever, that silence is no longer an option. I must speak. I must act. I must trust that even in a world weary of hope, the spark of courage and love can ignite change. That's what he left me with: clarity, purpose, and a challenge that can't be ignored. I made a vow, quietly, to carry his message forward, to speak even when it's uncomfortable, to tell the truth as I've seen it, as I've felt it, without embellishment, without apology, without fear. To remind people that love is stronger than hate, connection is stronger than division, hope is stronger than despair, and to trust that small acts, multiplied by enough willing hearts, can ripple outward until they change everything. As the morning light grew stronger, spilling across the floorboards, I realized the most important lesson of last night. It's not enough to simply see, to simply feel. The vision he gave me is meaningless if it stays locked inside me, if it doesn't reach the hearts and minds of others. I thought about the people I've known, the strangers I've passed on the street, the audience members who watch my movies and laugh, cry, and sometimes think. I thought about the responsibility I carry, not as an actor, but as a witness. A witness to truth, to the possibilities of despair and hope, and to the power of choice that rests in all of us. I remembered his words, how carefully he spoke them, how deliberate each phrase was. Love one another. Take care of each other. Choose grace over judgment. Choose hope over despair. These aren't slogans. They aren't platitudes or moralistic commandments. They're choices, daily, constant, active decisions that we make even when no one is watching. They're decisions that require courage, because the world often rewards cynicism, selfishness, and apathy over compassion, empathy, and generosity. Yet, if enough people choose differently, the trajectory changes. Communities heal, nations recover, children grow up believing in possibilities rather than doom, and I thought about fear, fear of ridicule, fear of failure, fear of being dismissed. All of it pales in comparison to the cost of inaction. It's a frightening thought, realizing how much hangs on our willingness to act in ways that might seem small, insignificant, or unnoticed. But that's the point. Change rarely arrives in grand, sweeping gestures. It comes from consistent, persistent choices by ordinary people. People who refuse to accept that the world is unchangeable, who refuse to let despair define the day, who trust that even a single act of courage can ripple outward until it becomes unstoppable. I thought about my own life, the roles I've played, the stories I've told. Each one was an attempt to convey some truth, some fragment of human experience, some spark of connection. And now I realize that life itself is a story, not bound by script or director, not edited for effect, but raw, unfolding, real, and within it, every act of kindness, every decision to love rather than hate, every effort to bridge a gap carries weight. It's all cumulative. It shapes the world. It shapes the future. It shapes the children who will inherit it. I thought again about the children, their hollow eyes and anxious hearts, and I felt both grief and resolve. We can't let this world be their inheritance if we can help it. We can't allow them to grow up in a society where connection is optional and empathy is rare. They deserve better, and we are responsible for giving it to them. Not because it's easy, not because it comes with reward, but because it is right, because it is necessary, because love, in its simplest, most courageous form, is the most powerful force we have. And yet, I also felt hope, not blind, naive hope, but a deliberate, chosen hope. The kind you feel when you've seen the worst and you still believe the best is possible. That's what he left me with. Not a roadmap, not a guarantee, but a challenge, a charge, a trust. The future is not written, it is in our hands. Every conversation, every gesture, every choice matters. Every act of love, mercy, compassion, and courage accumulates, shaping a future that, if we dare, can be brighter than we imagine. I realized that speaking the truth, bearing witness, and acting with integrity doesn't require fame, wealth, or influence. It requires presence, awareness, courage. It requires being willing to stand when it's easier to sit, to speak when it's easier to stay silent, to choose love when hatred is the path of least resistance. And even if the world mocks, ignores, or ridicules those choices, they are never wasted. They are seeds, they are sparks, they are the beginnings of change. And so I made a vow not for recognition, not for reward, not for legacy, but for the sake of truth itself. I will speak what I saw. I will tell the story of what is possible, both the despair and the hope. I will remind people that it is never too late to choose differently, to act with compassion, to see one another as human beings worthy of respect, worthy of dignity, worthy of love. And I will trust that in doing so, others will hear, will reflect, and will act. That's how change happens. That's how hope grows, one person at a time, one choice at a time. I thought about the ordinary people who feel powerless, those who believe their actions don't matter. And I understood that the extraordinary is built on ordinary courage. The future he showed me is not inevitable. It's contingent. It depends on choices we make today, tomorrow, and every day after. And that gives me a strange, beautiful kind of hope. Because while the vision of despair was vivid, the vision of possibility is equally real, equally attainable, if enough people dare to act. I felt the weight of responsibility, yes, but also a sense of peace. Not comfort, not ease, not relief, but the peace that comes from knowing the truth and choosing to face it, to carry it, and to speak it. That peace is quiet, persistent, and grounding. It does not remove fear or sorrow, but it allows clarity and courage to emerge alongside them. And that is what I am holding on to. That is what I am offering to anyone willing to listen. The truth, the vision, and the charge to act with love. As I finish telling this, as I sit here reflecting, I hope you understand the seriousness of what I experienced, but also the incredible potential of what we can do. The world is fragile, yes, but it is not beyond repair. We are not powerless. Every choice matters. Every act of love matters. Every moment of courage matters. And if we remember that, if we act on it, if we teach it to our children and live it ourselves, then the future can still be bright. It can be better. Last night, Jesus wept for America. He wept for what we were losing, for what we were allowing to slip away unnoticed, but he also left me with hope. He left me with clarity. He left me with a mission, not of grand gestures or heroic feats, but of witness, of story, of courage in everyday life. And I promise, from this moment onward, to live that mission, to speak, to act, to love, to bear witness, and to trust that others will do the same. So here's what I want to leave you with, the final truth from what I saw. It's never too late, never, to choose differently, to choose love over hate, unity over division, hope over despair. The soul of any nation, any community, any family, rests in the daily choices we make, in the actions we take, in the way we treat the person next to us. And if we remember that, if we act on that, if we choose love and courage and grace, then maybe, just maybe, the world can be what it was meant to be. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being willing to hear this, even if it feels strange, even if it feels impossible. I tell you this not to shock, not to alarm, not to frighten, but to illuminate. To remind us all that there is a way forward, and the way forward begins with us in the choices we make today, tomorrow, and every day after.